Yo, what's up guys? Josh, Magic Carp Poker here, back at Resorts World as you can see. Yeah, yesterday we had our first losing session after a 10 win streak, so wasn't ideal. Like honestly, I probably could have left winning, but I made two massive blunders. The first one being paying that guy off when I didn't think he had a strong hand and I had 10-8 suited, top pair with the gut shot. And the second one being just like not folding my top pair, top kicker on a wet board and running into quads. So yeah, I mean, you live and you learn. I feel like even though I lost yesterday, the good news is I limited it to a pretty small loss. And also I feel like I learned a lot. Excited to get back in there. I feel like every time I have a losing session, I'm like super motivated to grind more so than a winning session. Just because I'm hungry to improve, right? So gonna go down, hit the 1-3 streets at Resorts World, and I'll catch you guys in a bit.
So in this first hand, we're short-handed and the cutoff opens to $15. The button calls, and then I look down at pocket kings in the big blind. So I 3-bet to $50, and then the cutoff calls, but the button folds. Flop comes Jack Queen 4 rainbow. Seems like a decent flop for kings, so I go ahead and c-bet for $60, and then the cutoff makes the call. The turn is a 3 of diamonds, not really changing much, so I go ahead and bet $100, and then the cutoff jams for $111, and then I quickly make the call. The lady quickly shows that she flopped a set of jacks, and the river doesn't bring any help, so we lose this pot. I don't think I misplayed this hand. I asked Coach Arrow, and he said this was just a setup hand. I think the one saving grace is that the lady was short stacked, since if she was deep for $400, which is the max buy-in at Resorts World, then I would have lost double the money. So happy that she was short stacked to minimize the damage. In this next hand, we're still short-handed, and the cutoff limps. I go ahead and limp with King 10 offsuit from the small blind, and then the big blind bumps it up to $20. The cutoff calls, and then I also come along. Looking back, I've actually eliminated this hand from my range. King 10 offsuit is not a good hand to play, especially out of position, so this was a bit of a loose call. However, the flop does hit us as it comes 8-3 king rainbow, so we flop top pair, decent kicker. We go ahead and check, and the big blind continues for $15. The cutoff gets out of the way, and we go ahead and make the call. The turn is a 7 of spades, now bring a spade draw on board, and the action goes check check. The river is a jack of clubs, which honestly shouldn't change much, so I go ahead and check once more, and then the big blind bets $30, and then I make the call. The big blind shows pocket queens, and we take this pot down. So I know this hand isn't very interesting, but the reason I wanted to include this hand is because my poker friend, who's a full-time grinder in Vegas, he was actually telling me that he often just checks when he's out of position because opponents will make more mistakes if they're checked too versus if you bet into them. So I was actually just testing this theory out since he recently mentioned it to me before this session. And as you saw on the river, perhaps he just thought he was good and I didn't have a king, but he gave me $30 of value that had I started taking the betting lead, perhaps this guy could have made the fold. All right, so in this next hand, we're in a new table since our table just broke. And the first notable hand is this one. So the under the gun raises to $15. We look down at Jack 8 of hearts and we make the call from the cutoff. The small blind makes the call, and then the big blind now bumps it up to $33, which is a very tiny c-bet, essentially a main click. And this is not enough to shake anyone off as we all come along. Flop comes 2-4-6 with 2 hearts, so we flop a flush draw. Small blind and under the gun check. The big blind now bets for $100, and only I make the call. Now this is where the hand gets kind of weird. So after I made the call, he goes ahead and like flips over one of his cards, which is the ace of diamonds. Perhaps he thinks that I raised him or that I'm short stacked, but clearly we both have money behind. So when the turn comes at 2 of clubs, the action goes check check. And I make it seem like a courtesy check just because, you know, it's kind of a weird situation where he already showed one card. And then the river comes at 9 of hearts, so it gives us the flush. So when he checks over to us, we go ahead and bet $200 and he quickly folds. I actually asked Coach Arrow about this hand and he was telling me that this guy for sure had ace high. Like if he had pocket aces, then he definitely wouldn't have checked the turn. And he also said I should probably just bet the turn in that case because he showed weakness by showing one card. So I potentially could have took the pot down without seeing a river and making my hand. Since more often than not, after the turn comes, I'm only going to hit the river like 20% of the time, or I think 22%. And, you know, the other majority of the time I'm going to miss. And if I missed, then he would have won, right? Because I didn't have any pair. So yeah, this is like a bit of an awkward hand. I'm glad to take it down. However, this call is way too loose. I should not be calling a 3-bet with Jack 8 suited, nonetheless, even a raise. Like you can make the argument you can call this hand against a very loose opponent if you have a read on them, but Jack 8 suited is just a fold in this hand. So yeah, I get lucky on this hand, but I'm not happy with how I played since this is just way too loose of a call, especially in the 1-3 streets where people's ranges are pretty tight. All right, speaking of loose, this next hand is also a loose one. So under the gun +1 limps, we make the call from the small blind with Jack 6 suited, and the big blind checks his option. Flop comes Jack 2-2 rainbow, so we flop top pair on this paired board. So I go ahead and bet $5, and then the big blind gets out of the way, and the under the gun +1, who's like definitely a tourist. I wouldn't categorize him as like a serious poker player. He min raises it to $10, and I go ahead and make the call. The turn is now a Jack of diamonds, giving us a vote. So now I go ahead and bet $25, and then under the gun +1 raises to $55, and then I re-raise to $110, and he goes ahead and makes the call. The river's a 4 hearts, not really changing much, and I go ahead and check, and then he shoves for his remaining $76, and I make the call. He shows 2-4 suited for a lower full house, so he flop trips and then turned a full house, but I had a bigger full house, and he paid me off. I felt like the way this hand played out, he honestly just like donated since it was pretty face up what I had, I felt like. I think everyone else at the table knew, and yeah, this was just like a donation. Super lucky that he, I guess, put me on a different hand. And then in hindsight, I think I should have either re-raised him all in on the turn or led the river, just because by checking on the river, if he knew that I was on a jack, he could have saved his remaining $76. So yeah, not happy with how I played this hand, but definitely fortunate that this guy paid me off. All right, speaking of loose, like this session, now that I'm recapping it, is full of just terrible pre-flop plays. So there's a button straddle for $6. I look down at king 8 suited, and for whatever reason, I just bump it up to $15 since I see a suited king, and the cutoff calls, then the button defends his straddle. Flop comes 6-4-5 with a heart draw on board, so it's actually a pretty decent flop for us. We flop a flush draw as well as a gut shot straight draw, so we continue for $20, and only the cutoff comes along. The turn is an ace of clubs, which isn't the best card for us now since any ace high got there, so we go ahead and just check and slow down, and then the cutoff bets $40, and we go ahead and make the call with a bunch of outs. The river is kind of an out, but not the one we're looking for. It's an 8 of diamonds, giving us second pair, so I go ahead and check. The cutoff now bets $100, and I just quickly fold. I don't think I'm beating much. I lose to any ace, any middling pocket pair, any 7, any 2 pair. There's just so many hands that beat us that I felt like I'm not strong enough to call, and if he's got a bluff, then it's a good bet. So yeah, I shouldn't be in the hand in the first place since king 8 suited is also just a fold, but I guess pre-flop ranges weren't a thing in this session. All right, so to make matters worse, we thought that the king 8 suited hand was loose, but in our last and final hand of the session, we're on the button straddle. We look down at 8-3 offsuit, and only the small blind called, which, side note, I felt like the small blind was super nitty the whole session. He was like raising to $6 whenever he raised, barely play any hands. Chatty guy, he was talking a lot. Super friendly guy, but talked a little too much. And then there's like one hand where I think he ran like either an overpair into 2 pair or a set or something like that where he basically lost. He won an absolute monkey tilt and then was just playing every hand, raising to like $20 to $25 instead of his usual $6, and it was pretty bizarre. He ended up like punting his stack off after this hand. So perhaps this is what led to my betting pattern in this hand, but nonetheless, I think I misplayed this hand. So without giving too much away, let's just dive right into it. I'm on the button straddle. This player calls the button straddle 6, and then I go ahead and check my option with 8-3 offsuit. Not looking to put more money in pre-flop with this obvious premium hand. Flop comes 2-8-3 rainbow. Probably the best flop we could ask for with such a premium such as 8-3 offsuit. So when the small blind checks over to us, we go ahead and bet $10 to start building the pot, and he goes ahead and makes the call. The turn's an 8 of clubs, now giving us a boat, so very great run out for us. And when the small blind checks over to us, we bet $20. The small blind now min raises to $40, and then we just put him all in for $200, and he quickly makes the fold. I really don't like my line in this spot because I missed out on value on the river. I should have just flat called since I'm so strong. I feel like I would want him to catch up if he had something such as a club draw, which, you know, the turn brought a club draw, or if he had an overpair, or even if he was trying to bluff, I want to keep all his bluffs in. So I'm actually very unhappy with how I play this hand, since the best thing to do when you're nutted on the turn, in my opinion, is to check, since you want the opponent to catch up, and even if they don't catch up and they miss, if they're on any draws, then they might give you some value if they try to bluff. So yeah, I don't know why I splurged here. I think because I lost a pot to him earlier and I wanted to get him back, but definitely misplayed this hand. And in general, I would say my stance on button straddling is that I don't do it anymore. I don't straddle. I don't play bomb pots anymore. However, I'm recording this a month later from this session, so you guys will see in the next many vlogs that we have a lot of button straddles. But yeah, that pretty much wraps up this session. Honestly, looking back, my pre-flop ranges were way too loose. I should not even be involved in most of these hands. So I would not look at this session as anything I've really learned from, at least from the pre-flop perspective. But hopefully you guys enjoyed these hand recaps, and curious to hear if you guys would have had any suggestions on playing any of these hands differently.
All right, so we just wrapped up our session here at Resorts World. So we got a coach right here, blurred out, and yeah, Coach Arrow Poker just finished filming for his channel. It was a pretty good session considering the very first hand I got dealt, I ran my pocket kings into a set of jacks. The only saving grace was the lady with short stack, so only lost around like $200, a little more than $200 on that hand, and was able to climb back out of the hole to profit for like $67, I believe. So, you know, profit is profit. We'll take it, better than a loss. And honestly, I was like pretty happy with how I played for the most part. I think once it got short-handed, I got looser. Still need to refine my short-handed strategy. But yeah, we're gonna restart the win streak hopefully after the loss yesterday. So stay tuned for that. And gonna wrap up this vlog. So let me know what you guys think down below. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one.